outside the post office where I just came to see if I got any records. And I thought that I would do a little rant about not getting our records. I'm going to watch the screen today. I have, they're doing mail pickup. Everybody's on their way home. This is the commute in Los Gatos. This is actually where I commute. And so I just wanted to come in. I don't know who's going to come in at 5:30. I have another video that will be dropping soon which is covering a lot of our work. I have Puppy tangling me up once again in her leash. I know you guys get a charge out of that. And so I want to check the sound. Real Jingy, super nice to see you in here. Can you hear? Okay, Real Jingy. I just want to make sure the sound's okay. XXX. Oh, by the way, XXX. How many X's are you? 3 or 4? I can't see that very well. Real Jingy, can you hear okay? I appreciate the comment. La Bouillon Cube. You know, I wonder how many people even know what a bouillon cube is these days. I appreciate it. Hey, good, I got one of my moderators in here. It's my squirrel counterpart up there, which is perfect because I am here to talk about some records. I have no makeup on. I'm having a bad hair day because today is a day that I spent a lot of time. I worked on a video that will be publishing pretty soon, and then I also worked on some public records, and I wanted to talk about that. And I'm in Los Gatos. This is the zip code for my P.O. box. Actually, I think our zip code is 95031 if you have a P.O. box. But I wanted to talk about public records. I know I've done this in little bits and pieces in my various lives, but I want to talk about how I do what I do so that those of you who want to do it too can do it. And I thought particularly there's a channel that's gotten pretty popular. It's called Bay Area Transparency. And I just watched before I came down here. He is apparently facing criminal charges, which I know something about. And it does sound retaliatory. It was surprising to me that it happened in connection with UC Berkeley and Alameda County. And we're going to get into that in a minute because UC Berkeley is a public school. That means they're subject to public records laws. They have a law school that influences a lot of our courts in the Bay Area, especially in Alameda, Contra Costa, San Francisco. A little less so here in Santa Clara because we're more influenced by Stanford and Santa Clara University, and those are private universities. But I want to make sure, I thought it would be good to do a visual that you guys all understood that if I wanted to get records about the U.S. Post Office or the Postal Inspector General, who, by the way, has he has an ability to prosecute criminal charges. So mail theft, wire fraud, that falls under the jurisdiction of the Postal Inspector General. I did see something a while back that they were going to suspend that, and it just is starting to feel like people who used to prosecute certain kind of crimes, it's just a Wild West. Nobody's doing anything anymore. And then you hear from people like Bay Area Transparency, and he went in and did a records request and recorded his interaction. They put up signs that said no more recording, and now he's being criminally prosecuted. So coincidence or conspiracy, call it what you want. Those are the facts. And I also want to give a shout out. I grew up in Albany, which is right on the Berkeley border. So it's in Alameda County, I think. Yeah, I think it's in Alameda County. And it's right next to Contra Costa County. So I really grew up right on a county line. And I have a woman that a long time ago started sending things to my P.O. box. And I could tell that she was a little bit older because she hand wrote the notes to me. And I did call her one time. And I just love that you guys are all over and that you're real people and that you are watching and that you are paying attention. And I really, really appreciate it. Whoever says, is there a way to get in contact with you? I want to get involved in your work. We always are happy to have extra camera people. We need support. If you want to mail me something, you can mail me something completely confidentially. If people start breaking into our U.S. mail to get information, I'm just not that important, and I don't know why somebody would. But if you are nervous about sending me communications online, that's a good way to do it. And my P.O. box is 2220 Los Gatos, California 95031. And I usually put that in the description along with links to my PayPal and my Venmo for those of you who have some ability to support financially. For those of you who want to support in public records, I try to lead by showing you an example of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And so today I was just really frustrated because very late last night I got back, wasn't planning to do any work, and I opened my email and I found a response on my records to one of the courts, to Sonoma County Courts. And let me explain how I do my records requests and why that was so troubling to me. So my very first records request to Santa Clara County, I was investigating. It was the first time I had been involved in watching a criminal and a family law case at the same time. I had another reporter on the family law case because it was in front of a judge that I actually had in my own divorce case, and we decided it wouldn't be wise for me to do that. So I watched the criminal case, and it was my first time going into a criminal hearing. It involved the testimony of a San Jose police officer, Sean Pritchard, who is now in charge of the Police Officers Association. And it was very interesting because everything that I had ever seen on television or in the movies about how the courts work was completely off the table in that criminal proceeding. The judge delayed the hearing. The attorneys waltzed in, walked right to the back. The defendant, who was being prosecuted for some serious crimes, was doing a bro code with the bailiff, talking about the bailiff's kids playing Pop Warner, looking for some tips. And it looked as uncriminal court as anything I have ever seen in my life. And so my first records request to Santa Clara County, which is usually when I'm going to us, and again, there are 3 ways we make records requests. Federal records for any federal agency is called a FOIA. State agencies are by the records laws in your state. So ours are the California Public Records Act. And then if you want to get records from the courts, you have to use a local rule because the courts are not subject to the California Public Records Act, but they're subject to a rule that says they're supposed to comply as if they are subject to the California Public Records Act. So my first records request in Santa Clara County was I wanted to know about the cost of the litigation in prosecuting a 49er football player. And so the way that I calculated that cost, and I look at what are we spending on crime victims, what are we spending on defendants, prosecutions, public defenders, and in cases obviously where people can afford their own criminal defense, we don't get to know those numbers. But I did get records requests because my attorney was with the alternate defender's office, and the public defender, when they prosecuted me for the great photograph case, I first paid a criminal defense attorney, and he ended up just deciding he was going to sub out. He was also my attorney in the federal case that I brought against the county after they broke my hand. And one day he just called me to his office and said he couldn't represent me anymore. He didn't give me a reason. He didn't say why he had a conflict. I had paid him $20,000 that I had borrowed, so I still owe that money, and I was still prosecuted. Then taxpayers paid $58,000 for my attorney. And a year after I had started investigating the cost of prosecuting the 49er football player, that's when I was charged. And it was also a year after I made my first records request to the state bar. So it felt retaliatory. It looked retaliatory. I very much had the benefit of an alternate defender who was unbelievably terrific. Her name was Leah Gillis. She explained things to me. I probably over communicated with her. I'm sure she's never had a client like me because I would come up with a million things to tell her, records that I gave her, my whataboutism, and she would politely explain to me if it was relevant and why it wasn't going to be used. But in my case, there were 70 hearings. This is for a misdemeanor, which means the Santa Clara County District Attorney prosecuted me longer and harder and spent more money prosecuting me for making records requests, getting my hand broken in the court file room, and they prosecuted me longer and harder than they have prosecuted anybody else in the history of this county, including the Los Gatos party mom, including the NFL football players, including white collar crimes. My case went on longer, and it was just a misdemeanor, and it was based on violating a local court rule that the attorneys and judges had not even properly put into place. They called it a misdemeanor, and at the end of the day, the reality is the prosecutor holds all the cards, and the judge can grant motions in limine and influence what the jury hears in the way of evidence and witnesses, and you can win or lose cases all on motions in limine and things that happen before the trial. So one of my first requests was I wanted all the records, this is to Santa Clara County, all the records of records requests that had been made by other reporters in the county. So these are reporters from the San Jose Mercury News, and I expected that for the years that these newspapers and NBC and ABC and all the mainstream news organizations were reporting on things here, that there would be just massive lists. And I wasn't asking for the records that they got. I wanted to know what the reporters were thinking, what they were interested in, because as a reporter, you can go out in your community and find something to investigate every single day. And so what was shocking to me was when they produced the records, two things stood out. First of all, there were no requests being made. These reporters that we had held up on a pedestal and thought that they were bringing us this information. The worst was probably Tracy Kaplan, who worked, and Robert Solana. They both were reporters for the San Jose Mercury News, and it didn't add up. They were making no requests to support their reporting. My reporting is backed with records every single time, and you'll see that in the upcoming video. I have waited 4 years for some records. And so that was shocking to me. The other thing that was shocking was I asked for the costs of the court reporter that was in the criminal courts, because we knew that parents in family court were being charged these excessive fees. You could have a 1-hour hearing and your transcript would cost $3,000. They would give you a court reporter for free back in the day, but if you wanted the transcript in order to appeal or question an order or, just to do what you need to do legally, we had to pay several $1,000s. And in my own case, when I was getting divorced, I noticed that wealthy people would 1099 their lawyers, and they would also 1099 court reporters. So I asked the court reporter for her tax ID number, and boy, did the retaliation fly. She copied in other attorneys, and there was suddenly an appearance that something was going on with a disproportionate treatment of people who have to represent themselves and who don't have money or who are middle class. And that's a stretch to come up with a couple $1,000s for a court reporter. And so all of that started to come to play. We eventually found out that the court reporter in the 49ers family law case was actually altering transcripts and giving false testimony for the benefit of the district attorney. And when they found that out and there was an administrative hearing that sanctioned her, the DA did not prosecute her. What she did was commit several felonies. She got a free pass. Meanwhile, I was charged for a misdemeanor for several years, and because I had covered that 49er case, she even asked the DA if they wanted me to search transcripts from the 49er case, and the court reporter said because she used to come in here all the time to watch those proceedings. Court reporters are supposed to document the proceedings, not monitor which members of the public are sitting in there. So those records requests just kind of triggered the rabbit hole of how unjust our system is, but more importantly, how it really works. And somebody was telling me the other day that public defenders typically are known as the dump trucks of the legal system, that they literally are known for just backing the truck up and dumping you in jail. And I have seen that from people that are represented by the public defender in serious cases. And these public defenders don't do their job. They don't get discovery. They don't hire investigators. And it reminds me of divorce attorneys who are being overpaid by their clients and don't do the work. And it's especially frustrating knowing how much we work to do our job as independent reporters. And I was thinking about that today with Bay Area Transparency, because he's asking for a GoFundMe to help with his legal fees. And you can get a good criminal defense attorney. I've seen people pay for that, but I don't know that it always helps if they're actually coming after you for political or First Amendment retaliations issues. So anyway, so that's kind of the background of that. I also started learning how to do records requests. Puppy has friends here. Hi, sweeties. I started learning how to do records requests. Hi there, Excalibur 1225. I started learning, and I had a mentor on this, how to make records requests to the courts. And I think there are about 3 reporters in the world who know how to do that. It's under a California Rules of Court 10.500. And so for those of you who are wanting information about your courts, you can get a lot of information. We're finding the courts, though, they really guard information, such as information about how many times somebody has made a preemptory strike and tried to disqualify a judge before they hear their case. And you're allowed to do that. When a case is first assigned, it's supposed to be randomly assigned so that there can't be any rigging and funny business. And if that, you know that you've gotten a judge that's not going to be able to be fair, you don't even have to give a reason. You can just simply file a motion to disqualify. I'm going to flip around so I can pick Puppy's leash up. You can simply file, it's known as a 170.6, and you can disqualify the judge. Here we go, Los Gatos commute traffic. And so we've been trying to get that because you'll often see in the news, they'll talk about how many times judges, so in criminal court, when the prosecutor thinks that they're going to have a judge not playing ball with them, maybe somebody more favorable or empathetic to the defense and public defenders, prosecutors will do what's known as papering the judge. And if the judge in criminal court is papered enough, and we know that there have been judges in the past where either the public defenders are saying we won't appear in front of that judge or the prosecutors are, then the courts usually have to reassign that judge, and guess where they go? They go to family court. So all the people, the attorneys who know these judges are either incompetent or biased, and they paper them with disqualifications on preemptory challenges. They can literally move that judge in the courts to family court. So sometimes we can get courts cooperating and giving us that information. One of my associates did what I want to call a BA request at the Sacramento courts because he did what we call a ring test, and that's where you make the same request to several courts. And he did a request for sanctions and how much people were being sanctioned and who they had to pay. And what was interesting was Sacramento produced a list that showed very little in sanctions. I don't think there was any really over $500. And Los Angeles also required him to submit the request in paper, not email. He had to mail it in. And then they produced in paper all of the records. And we do still have agencies that produce records, so I always get excited coming here to my P.O. box to see if anybody has sent me some public records or some tips. And I mean both kinds of tips. And so it was interesting when they did that ring test on sanctions, the Santa Clara County Court CEO, David Yamasaki, wrote that Santa Clara doesn't track that. Well, in Santa Clara, people are getting sanctioned hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not making that up. I've reported on that. I've posted about that. Kathy Fike, who was married to an attorney, Richard Falcone, has to be the worst. They sanctioned her $1 million. So what I'm trying to show everybody is we hear that governments are sanctioned for doing certain things related to very serious issues that cause serious public harm. And they might have sanctions in the form of tariffs. They might have sanctions in, non-economic sanctions, but you just don't hear them being sanctioned large amounts of money. And I hear more family court people being sanctioned more than people committing actual crimes or doing actual harm. These are people just involved in a divorce. Whoever said, I'd love to watch more about Judge James Towery. I'm going to take credit for what I think was getting Judge Towery to resign from the bench. And for those of you who are following the judges that I'm reporting on here in Santa Clara County, I did just get the court to confirm that Cindy Hendrickson's last official day with the court will be April 7th. And the attorneys are telling me that she won't be on the bench anymore after February 4th. And I do think that both of those judges leaving the bench have something to do with our reporting, because we've reported a lot on wrongdoing related to those judges. But for me, a judge just leaving doesn't mean that my reporting was successful. Judges should be prohibited from doing private judging. If they have engaged in wrongdoing, there was a judge in Sacramento that just simply didn't bother to hear juvenile criminal cases. He didn't bother to rule in it. And there is a 90-day rule that says judges in the state have to rule within 90 days. He just didn't do it. And these kids were in jail. They couldn't get orders to appeal. And apparently some appellate attorney at the end of his career, when he didn't care what the judges would say about him, he tried to do it legally, and they kicked him out. Nobody would grant him a writ or relief. And so he filed a complaint against the judge, and it did stick. The judge got in trouble, and I think he got removed from the bench. And that's a very big thing, because we just don't remove judges. We don't indict judges anymore. The last judge that I know that was indicted was William Dancer, and that was here in Los Gatos, where he was rigging traffic tickets with the Los Gatos police. So we try to watch all of these things so that you guys will understand what's going on. But I want to talk about what just happened with the records. First of all, in Santa Clara, when I asked for records about Minors Counsel, they waited 4 years to give me those records. And when they did give me the records showed how often each judge appointed attorneys. They named the attorneys, and I also got the financial records of how much those attorneys that were paid as Minors Counsel, some places they call them gals. And remember, there is no constitutional right to have an attorney appointed in a family law case. And these records were startling to me. Some attorneys if the parents in a divorce can't pay for the Minors Counsel, then we pay for it. Taxpayers are paying for it. And that can happen more than you know. Here in Los Gatos, when a controversial resident was suing, the puppy wants to walk. When a controversial resident was suing one of the mayor and a city council person, the town paid for their defense. Well, I don't recall the town paying for anybody's defense in a family law case, so that was a little bit problematic. But these Minors Counsel are individual attorneys, family law attorneys. They're hacks. They don't have any particular legal skill. Nobody can explain why a child whose parents are involved in a divorce need an attorney. And they're very closely related to these networks, which are supervised visitation, therapists, and everything else that is just this giant machine of money making. Batterers classes, survivors benefits, whatever you want to call it. And so I did a ring test to Sonoma County, Los Angeles County, Orange County, Contra Costa County, Stanislaus County, and Merced County, asking for records related to Minors Counsel. And yesterday, Los Angeles produced, and I didn't just ask for Minors Counsel, I also asked for court reporter records, because I want to know how much we're paying these attorneys for children where there's no constitutional right, and how much we are paying for court reporters, because now most of these family courts do not have court reporters in the courtrooms. So we're paying for children to have attorneys where there is no constitutional right for it, and yet we're not paying for court reporters to take historical records of the proceedings. And without a court reporter, you can't appeal, because you have to have a written record in order to appeal. Who asked, why not San Mateo County? The reason that I asked the counties that I did is there is currently a lawsuit against Santa Clara, Contra Costa, which I also made the request to, San Diego, Santa Clara, I think those four, for not providing court reporters in these family law cases. And I am trying to find out if we are blowing court budgets on these BS court report or minors counsel at the expense of court reporters. And so far, LA is the only one. So Santa Clara, that initially gave me some of these records that blew my mind, now won't give me the records. I fight with them every week. And I hear the tone. The court has no comment. We're going to check into why we're not giving it to you. And you just get the hamster wheel run around. And so yesterday, probably the one that pissed me off the most, came from Sonoma County. And I went up to Sonoma County one time before, and the presiding judge, Shelley Averill, granted my media request in that case. And it was a case involving Mark the process server and his court reporter. And she granted my media request. I recorded the entire proceeding. I still haven't used it, but I have it. And I have had media requests granted in Monterey County. I have had one here in Santa Clara County granted. But other than that, I want to say I've had 200 media requests denied here in Santa Clara County. And the one that I did have was granted in a criminal case. And there was a lot of funny business with moving the case, and they actually held it in a different courtroom where we didn't have a media request granted. So there was some judge shuffling and some other things going on in a criminal case, and that was really very startling to me as well. But yesterday, Sonoma County actually sent me an email. It wasn't from the county attorney or executive, like the court executive like there usually is. It was just from the email box, like the PIO or some hack clerk in the court. And they just sent me a response to my request on the same day that LA sent records that blew my mind, policies for minors counsel, all these other things. And Santa Clara has produced financial records. Merced County has produced financial records. Contra Costa has produced financial records. Sonoma just gave me one line about minors counsel and court reporters. They just said no such records exist, which is outright BS. And the reason that it's BS is because the court has laws and they have to execute those laws and operate the courts. And the way they do that is through policies and procedures. And those could be official policies. This is like policing. You can get the official policies, or you can get informal policies that might be in memos or in emails. They're paying minors counsel lots of money because it's a big conflict. We have Dan Beck up there, Laura Dunst, and Julie Levy are three that I just hear constant complaints over. And these are not little complaints, but these are complaints about these minors counsel not following the law, not being competent, and we're paying for their attorney's fees. Judges just rubber stamp the attorney's fees, but they're stripping custody of parents and they're inciting the conflict to keep the litigation going. So for Sonoma County to tell me no such records exist on that was probably one of the most shocking responses that I ever got. So I did fire back a response. I'll maybe even post my response so that you guys can see it. I called them out on it. I said, that's not possible. Here is the letter from LA County, and this is what it should look like, so kick it up. And we might be going to court because we could file lawsuits all day long, but we don't have the attorneys to do that, the resources to do that. And so we have to push back and we have to decide when we're going to get records. I would take this lawsuit on in a heartbeat, and we would find a lawyer to do this. There are not enough civil rights attorneys going on, but these minors counsel are so problematic to people involved in family court. It is like, it's similar to giving you a public defender and just knowing that the public defender is incompetent, doesn't do their job, and is going to send you to prison. Only in family court, the equivalent is you're going to lose custody of your kids, you're going to be charged excessive money, taxpayers are going to pay for a lot of it, and these minors counsel, they have learned to just churn the fees. I've seen their bills, and the court reporters are only charging modest amounts of money for these hearings where certain attorneys are involved. So we're looking at that too. You know, what are the court reporters doing, and are they gouging self-represented litigants and benefiting attorneys? Are they getting paid under the table? You know, which was my first thought when my court reporter years ago copied in opposing counsel, and everybody started beating up on me only because I asked for her tax documents. Now, remember, that's why I started here at the post office. When somebody mails you a bill or sends it via email, that's a wire or that's mail. And if they're committing fraud when they're doing it, the U.S. Postal Inspector would have jurisdiction over investigating that and even prosecuting it. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying that I expect anybody in the government to actually function. I keep seeing individuals get away with things I never thought was possible. It's not like how it felt when I was growing up, where we felt like the media worked, that police actually did investigations, that prosecutors prosecuted for public safety. So I just wanted to come in and talk about Sonoma Courts, but I also wanted to talk about Los Gatos, because Los Gatos has taken 4 years to produce records related to a controversial resident who was the subject of those code enforcement hearings. And they gave her a private judge and divorce attorney as her hearing officer who was not paying his license fees. And in my next video, you'll see the other attorney, who is a former prosecutor turned alternate defender, IDO, and is a private criminal defense attorney, does business out of Los Gatos, was prosecuted for crimes himself after he let it be known he was going to prosecute a San Jose police officer. And so that's all covered in my next video, because I now am picking up my camera and going down, and when I don't get these records, or the town has informal policies that makes me wait weeks and months for these records, that stalls my reporting. I can't give you facts and information. I'm not the San Jose Mercury. I can't do my job if we don't get tips and public records that allow me to follow up on that. So that's what we're doing. I hope you'll watch the next video. It seems to be we're having a little fight right now with algorithms, and for those of you who understand what I'm talking about, you can look through my views on some of my last videos. It's been a little bit surprising to me why certain things are happening that way. Leslie, nice to see you in here. And so it is 6:01, and I hope you guys will keep looking for your notifications on this channel, because I do have it set on automatic for today. And I hope you will watch those videos, you will like them, you will share them, and I hope you will teach people how to make records requests. Bay Area Transparency said in his video today that he was going to the international school at UC Berkeley to do a records request, and then going back to get the records when he experienced an arrest and now a prosecution. And if that's true, I would really like to know what he requested. And I think that the way that we can all back each other up, you guys can make anonymous records requests. You can have them delivered to P.O. boxes. You can have them delivered to an attorney if you trust an attorney and they're willing to give you their address. You can use an anonymous email address, and I try to give you examples. So no matter what records you want to know, public records tell us the business of our let's take guilty of being right out of here. I hope my moderators, Leslie, you're a moderator, you know what to do. And so I hope you'll all pay attention to that, because after years and years of investigating, I know my videos, sometimes you're wondering, what am I doing? Why am I recording all these public records requests? My next few videos are going to tie that up and show you why it's important. And I think the biggest issue is, are we getting too big to prosecute crimes in our communities, so that all we can do is go after cop watchers who are making records requests and reporters who are in court file rooms trying to get records and breaking their hands, and we're prosecuting them. And I really think that when you hear people talk about public safety and crime statistics, that you will pay attention to my next video, and you will pay attention to what the media, to what algorithms, and to what local governments do. I do want to close with something that is really important. Somebody sent me this morning there was a very important Supreme Court case, and I don't know if it was this week or last week, but it's that recent. And it was a case about a veteran who was running a business and was being harassed in Idaho by code enforcement and administrative type hearings. They kept saying they were doing inspections. And he found a lawyer who dug to the code, found out how they were using it, and I think it took them 7 years to get it to the Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court made a unanimous ruling on that governments from doing these administrative hearings, code enforcement hearings, and regulatory hearings, they cannot do searches without a warrant. And they had been doing that for years. And so the government is going to behave badly until we stop them. And that is a really important Supreme Court decision. And what is most notable about it is we all have seen the politics in our courts. We have seen what we view as conservative judges and liberal judges and, you know, everything that happens with that. All justices unanimously agreed you cannot search American people, businesses, residents without a search warrant. The government can't half-step and can't skip that step. So try to remember that, that if you are in a place where you're doing something and the police get you and you're talking to them or whatever, you might get arrested and they can take your camera equipment, they can take whatever, and that's what's going on with Bay Area transparency right now. But other than that, the government no longer, and apparently there are about 7 other states that had similar laws. Puppy, we're not going in there right now. There were 7 other states that had similar laws, and so this is going to affect a lot of people. So anybody who has been subject to a search, remember, you don't have to give consent to the government to come into your business or into your home without a warrant. And if you do, once you waive that, you've waived your 4th Amendment right. But that unanimous Supreme Court ruling that is just out, I saw, I'll put a link in it because I saw somebody doing he only had about 12,000 subscribers, but he did a really good job of explaining it. It was a nice video, and he pointed out that mainstream media should be reporting all over the place about this because it affects everybody, and there hasn't been a peep. The fact that 9 Supreme Court justices all agreed on this, and it was a unanimous decision in this day and age, is huge, and that alone should have been reported on. And I didn't see mainstream media report on that. So I want you all to remember your rights when it comes to your businesses, code enforcement hearings, public records, because if we don't exercise our rights and we don't do it together and support each other, we're all going to lose them. This stuff is not sexy. This stuff, it does not make us a lot of money, but we are going to lose our rights if we don't all do it. So I want to thank you, Leslie, thank you for being in here, for everyone who moderates and who keeps this going. You keep me going. For those of you who send me little tips or financial support when I come to the post office, it really makes my day worthwhile at the end of the day. And I just wanted to thank all of you. So watch the next video that's going to drop. Look for the notices. If you're not getting notices, please let me know. Please hype videos when you see them, like them, share them, and please copy my work and make public records requests. Pick up your camera and remember your rights, because we all have to do it together or we don't get them. Thanks, you guys.